The email arrived at 9:17 a.m., just as my daughter was tying her sneakers by the door. I remember the time because the coffee in my mug was still too hot to drink, and the morning light was sliding across our hardwood floor like nothing in the world had changed. The subject line was short, professional, almost polite, but I smiled anyway. My daughter, Lily, looked up at me, her dark hair still a little wild from sleep. She was 9 now, older than she'd been the day someone decided to package cruelty inside pastel tissue paper and call it motivation. She tucked her backpack higher on her shoulder and asked if she was late. "No," I said softly. "We're right on time." I watched her step outside, confident, humming under her breath, unaware of how close the past still hovered behind us. I waited until the door clicked shut before I opened the email fully. Termination effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair, smoothing the sleeve of my blouse, silk cool against my skin. The city skyline beyond my window looked calm and different. Cars moved. People hurried. Somewhere, a meeting was being canceled. A name was being removed from a door. Years ago, someone had handed my daughter a gift bag with 2 printed words inside, "Try harder." They thought that was the end of the story. They were wrong. Because this morning wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences finally catching up. 3 years earlier, I stood in the multipurpose room of Brighton Ridge Academy, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The walls were covered in student artwork, sunflowers, stick families, glittered dreams taped crookedly to beige paint. Parents clustered in small groups, laughing too loudly, comparing test scores as if they were stock prices. Lily stood beside me, her fingers threaded through mine. She wore the blue dress she loved, the one that made her feel smart, as she told me that morning. Her shoulders were straight, hopeful. She had worked so hard for this program, extra reading, late-night math games at our kitchen table, me quizzing her while dinner burned. When her name was called, she squeezed my hand once and walked forward. The woman at the front, Ms. Randall, immaculate smile, sharp blazer, handed Lily a pastel gift bag. Pink tissue paper fluffed out the top. Applause fluttered around the room, thin and polite. Lily looked back at me, eyes bright, and peeked inside. Her smile faded. She pulled out a small card. White. Printed font. No handwriting. Just 2 words. Try harder. For a second, Lily didn't understand. I watched confusion crease her forehead, watched her search my face for translation. Around us, the room went strangely quiet. Not silent, just careful. Adults pretending not to notice. Parents suddenly fascinated by their phones. Ms. Randall leaned down slightly and said, in a voice sweet enough to rot teeth, "This is to encourage growth." Encourage. My throat closed. Heat rushed to my ears. I wanted to demand an explanation, to ask why my child's effort had been reduced to a public lesson in humiliation. Instead, I knelt and brushed Lily's hair behind her ear. "It's okay," I whispered, though it wasn't. "Put it back in the bag." Lily nodded, swallowing hard. She didn't cry. That hurt more. On the drive home, she stared out the window. At a red light, she finally asked, "Mom, did I do bad?" That was the moment something broke open inside me. "No," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "You did brave." That night, I called my mother. I told her everything. She listened, quiet and steady, then said, "Some places confuse pressure with purpose. Don't let them teach your daughter shame." I lay awake long after Lily fell asleep, staring at the ceiling, the gift bag sitting untouched by the door. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I packed Lily's things. I wrote a withdrawal email. And I promised myself this would not be the story's ending. Leaving Brighton Ridge was terrifying, even if it felt right. I had no plan beyond keeping Lily safe, keeping her confident, keeping her free from those small, cruel judgments masquerading as lessons. But fear has a way of sharpening purpose, and I soon discovered that once you strip away the illusions of what others think, there's a kind of clarity you can't buy. I found a small office space downtown, sunlight streaming through dusty blinds, peeling paint along the ceiling, but it was ours. Lily could have a little corner with her books and drawings, and I could start building a tutoring program from scratch. I called it Bright Horizon, a quiet defiance to the academy that had tried to humiliate her. The first months were brutal. I was exhausted by 9 p.m., eyes dry from staring at spreadsheets, my back sore from dragging chair after chair for weekend sessions. I questioned everything. Was I overreacting? Was this even sustainable? But every time Lily hugged a freshly completed math worksheet or proudly announced she read a whole chapter on her own, I remembered the gift bag. Try harder. We already had. We were just doing it on our terms now. Then came Caroline Bennett, a former education consultant, who walked into my tiny office one rainy Tuesday. She'd been sent by a mutual friend who knew my story, and she saw potential I hadn't allowed myself to notice. She talked less about pitfalls and more about strategy, branding, outreach, partnerships. She didn't coddle me. She didn't pity me. She simply said, "You can build something no one can take away if you stop apologizing for wanting it." Caroline became my mentor, a steady voice amidst the chaos. Together, we landed our first client, a small private school that needed after-school programs. That was followed by another and then a local community center. Slowly, the pieces came together. I learned marketing, contract negotiation, even a little public speaking. I felt the pulse of empowerment that comes when you realize your talent can move mountains if you stop hiding it. All the while, I kept our victories quiet. Brighton Ridge didn't need to know. Ms. Randall didn't need to see. The world didn't need a spectacle. I posted modest updates online, the kind that looked like any other mom sharing photos of her child's craft projects or a lunch she made from scratch. Behind closed doors, though, we were building an empire. One where respect wasn't optional and success was undeniable. Every time Lily looked up at me with pride shining in her eyes, I felt the old anger settle into calm determination. That little gift bag, with its cruelly cheerful message, became less a mark of shame and more a reminder. We could rise without begging, without justifying, without apology. Step by step, we were carving out a life no one could mock. And in the quiet moments before she fell asleep, when I finally sank into my office chair with a mug of lukewarm coffee, I allowed myself a small, secret smile. The future was ours, built not on their approval, but on the strength we had discovered together. It was a crisp Thursday morning when Brighton Ridge's board members unexpectedly requested a meeting. The email was polite, almost apologetic, but the subtext was clear. They expected me to be struggling, to be the woman who left in a huff, too flustered to make anything of herself. They didn't know that I had become someone entirely different. I let Lily go to school that morning, her backpack bouncing, the crisp autumn air tugging at her hair. She waved, blissfully unaware of what was about to unfold. I stayed behind, straightened the papers on my mahogany desk, and adjusted the fresh lilies in a crystal vase, small touches that marked the space as mine, not theirs. When they arrived, I greeted them in the lobby. Mr. Halliday, the chairman, and Ms. Randall, whose smug smile had haunted Lily for years, entered cautiously. Their shoes clicked against polished hardwood, and I could feel the subtle shift in the room's energy. They expected discomfort, unease, humility. Instead, I offered them calm hospitality, gestures so ordinary they masked the power beneath. We walked through the doors to my office. Natural light poured in, glinting off the sleek shelving lined with carefully curated books, awards, and framed letters of commendation. A soft rug muffled our steps, and an abstract painting, one I had commissioned myself, hung proudly behind my desk. It was my signature of ownership. This room, this life, this success had been built from scratch. I gestured for them to sit. Their eyes flicked over the details. The first big contract framed in silver, a letter from a prominent educational association, even the clean, professional stack of files ready for the day. The realization began to dawn slowly, the shift in their posture subtle but undeniable. "Welcome," I said softly, my voice calm but firm. "I'm glad you could make it." Ms. Randall cleared her throat. "I didn't expect this," she murmured, almost to herself. I let the silence linger, allowing the truth to settle. Then I opened my laptop and projected a simple chart onto the wall. Bright Horizons growth over the past 3 years. Client list, revenue streams, awards, and partnerships. Numbers climbed steadily, each one a quiet testament to the hours, the sacrifices, and the resilience they had underestimated. They told my daughter to try harder. I said, letting the words hang in the air. And I did. I tried harder. We tried harder. And in the time since, we've built something you never imagined. Mr. Halliday's jaw tightened. Ms. Randall's eyes widened, disbelief etched into every line of her face. I continued, enumerating our achievements, but I could see the guilt forming in the corners of their expressions. They had dismissed us, underestimated us, and now the weight of their misjudgment pressed down on them. Finally, I slid a letter across the desk. Plain, formal, but absolute. Termination notices. Effective immediately. Their positions were no longer tenable. Their mistakes had consequences. I watched as shock transformed into silent comprehension. They had expected nothing. They were now faced with everything. And through it all, I remained composed, steady. The years of struggle, the nights of doubt, the tiny victories kept secret, all of it crystallized into this moment. I had not shouted. I had not demanded recognition. I had only built, quietly and methodically, until the truth of our strength became impossible to ignore. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Ms. Randall nodded, as if acknowledging an uncomfortable truth. Mr. Halliday's eyes lingered on the chart, tracing the path we had carved without their approval. They had wanted us small. We were anything but. The room had shifted entirely. Brighton Ridge's board members, once towering figures in their institution, now sat before me like children caught in a storm they couldn't control. I leaned back slightly, my fingers interlaced on the polished surface of my desk, the cool wood grounding me in a power I had quietly cultivated over the past 3 years. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, I began, my voice calm, deliberate. But I am here to make sure that the mistakes made in the past don't repeat themselves. I let my gaze settle on Ms. Randall. You mocked my daughter. You underestimated her. And you underestimated me. Her lips parted, but no words came. I continued. Before you leave, there are conditions. Not for punishment, but for growth. If this institution is to maintain credibility, if it's to truly educate rather than belittle, these changes must happen. I outlined them carefully, each one tied to accountability and human dignity. Respect and recognition. Staff must attend mandatory training on emotional intelligence and constructive feedback. No more gift bags masking derision. Every child deserves encouragement without humiliation. Transparency. All evaluation metrics must be communicated clearly to students and parents. No hidden expectations. No passive-aggressive motivational gestures. Mentorship. Teachers must mentor, not intimidate. Lily's experience revealed a systemic flaw, one that had to be corrected for future students. I watched their reactions. Guilt, disbelief, a hint of admiration flickering through eyes that had long believed themselves untouchable. The termination letters were symbolic, a reset, not just a punishment. Every contract they had with Brighton Ridge was nullified. The board's arrogance had collided with the reality of competence and integrity, and it was irrevocable. I paused, letting the weight of the room settle. Then I added, almost quietly, I care about the children here. I care about education. But I will not allow toxic patterns to continue. If these terms aren't met, your roles are permanently concluded. The message was clear. Compassion tempered with firmness. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't seeking vengeance. I was enforcing consequence and guiding a shift in behavior, one that they would either embrace or be swept aside by. Mr. Halliday shifted uneasily in his chair, fingers drumming against the armrest. You've built quite a program, he said, his voice low, almost reverent. I allowed a faint smile. Yes. Quietly, deliberately, and without needing validation from those who once doubted me. Ms. Randall met my gaze for the first time, without a mask. There was recognition there, an acknowledgement of the years, the work, the power they had overlooked. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Silence and evidence were more powerful than any speech. By the time they left, the terms were accepted, the future of Brighton Ridge was set on a better path, and my daughter's name, her dignity, was honored. And as the office door clicked shut behind them, I allowed myself a small, private exhale, the kind that comes after a storm passes, when the world has been set back into its proper order. Lily would never know the full depth of their shock. She only needed to know that standing tall and protecting what was hers could rewrite the story in ways even the cruelest people could not anticipate. The days after the confrontation were quiet, almost surreal. Brighton Ridge had begun its slow transformation, guided by the conditions I had set. Staff attended workshops, policies were revised, and for the first time in years, the focus shifted from ego to the children, the very reason the institution existed. I walked past the hallways occasionally when visiting Lily, noting small but significant changes, a teacher kneeling beside a student to explain a problem instead of barking instructions, notes of encouragement pinned beside classroom doors, a subtle shift in energy that whispered of hope. At home, Lily skipped through the kitchen, backpack swinging, her laughter spilling like sunlight across the countertops. She had no idea how much of the battle I had fought in silence, how many nights I had pored over spreadsheets, contracts, and emails to ensure her dignity was restored. And I wanted it that way. Some victories are sweetest when they remain quietly triumphant, shared in glances, in hugs, in the private moments of pride that only a mother and daughter can know. One evening, I placed the old gift bag on the top shelf of my office, the tissue paper slightly faded but intact. Once, it had symbolized cruelty and judgment. Now, it was a reminder of resilience, a talisman of the journey that had brought us here. Lily wandered in, curious. I let her peek inside. She found nothing of malice, only the memory, and perhaps the lesson that challenges can be transformed into strength. I leaned back in my chair, watching her run back to her homework corner. The skyline beyond the window glowed with the last light of day, golden and calm. I traced the edges of my desk, feeling the smooth polish, the evidence of labor, persistence, and belief. This space, this life, was ours, built on courage, patience, and a refusal to be diminished. And in that quiet moment, I whispered a line I would carry for the rest of my life, a truth forged from years of struggle, love, and unwavering determination. They told my daughter to try harder, so I showed her how power really looks. Lily would grow up knowing that words alone could never define her, that the strength of a mother's love, coupled with her own resilience, could turn humiliation into triumph, and that sometimes the most powerful victories are the ones that unfold quietly, meticulously, leaving the world to marvel only when the time is right. We had walked through fire, shielded each other, and emerged not just unscathed, but transformed. And as I closed the office door behind me that evening, I knew that our story, our real story, was only just beginning.